Good morning.
Good morning. It's the last Sunday in January, January 30th, 2022. And our topic today is, what kind of house do you live in? And I'm going to start by reading by Ernest Holmes and an affirmative prayer. And it's entitled, I Surrender All Fear and Doubt. It starts with a quote from the Bible where Jesus is saying, fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give to you the kingdom. We should always keep in mind that we are beneficiaries of life. We do not put the chicken in the egg, nor the oak tree in the acorn. Rather, we pull them out. We did not create the divine presence, nor the law of good. We commune with this presence and use this law. Therefore, Jesus said that it is your Father's good pleasure to give to you the kingdom. It is our business to receive it. And in doing this, we follow the same method that any scientist would. For the scientist knows that he did not create the laws, and she did not create the principles. They use them. They use them for their employees. And so say with me, if you like, this affirmative prayer. It is my Father's good pleasure to give to me the kingdom. Today, I accept this kingdom, and I accept it in its fullness. Because of it, the day contains joy and happiness and is filled with peace. Running through it all is the silent power of spiritual wisdom and love, harmoniously and happily governing my thoughts, decisions, and acceptances, so that everything I do is done with ease. I lay all weariness aside and accept the life-giving, invigorating, dynamic activity of spirit, knowing that it vitalizes every organ of my body. It flows with power and strength and purpose through everything I do, as it leads me gently down the pathway of life. Today is the day that God has made, and I am glad in it. And when evening comes, the cool shadows of peace will fall across my pathway, and the quiet of the night will enter into my soul, while the beatitude of spirit flows through me as a river of life. And so it is.
So it is. I'm going to start off today with where this title came from. What is the house that you? What is your house made of?
What kind of house do you live in?
What kind of house do you live in? We watched a movie on Netflix, I think it was.
Stars.
Stars, and it was called The
Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Yeah, I remember what it was, right? And it's really about his childhood experience of having lived in a house in San Francisco that his grandparents built, or his grandfather built. And because they were poor and there was so much lack in their life, this house, having been built by his grandfather, suddenly had enormous value. It meant something to have built a mid-Victorian house in a neighborhood where obviously no Black man ever would have built a house. Well, as the story unfolds, it turns out his grandfather did not build a house. But it got me to thinking about the house that we live in our mind, and the house that we grew up with, and the stories that we were told that helped create us, that may or may not be true, but the truth of what they created in us. And I remember when I was very, very young. And
can I just put in a few words there before you tell your story?
Maybe two or three.
Thank you. So we're using the house as a metaphor,
yes,
for the house of our beliefs, because they were largely formed in that house that we grew up in. But those beliefs are about everything: how valuable you consider yourself as a human being, how much love you think you deserve, how desirable you are, likable you are, what you think you deserve for affluence, for money, for sustenance. All those things, all those beliefs were formed in your childhood. And we may have worked most of our adulthood to try to change some of those, but that's what we want to examine here, is what is the house of your beliefs that creates your experience. So now,
Yeah,
please
and
tell your
for the good and for the bad of it.
yeah.
I grew up in a household where we were very, very poor. We often moved early in the morning, like 3 o'clock in the morning, in order to be able to have moved out into another place before the landlord got there to collect the rent. So I don't think we could have been a lot poorer than we were. But my
And you had
father,
a lot of siblings.
yeah, and of course I had 5 brothers and 1 sister, although I was an only child, and
7 kids.
7 kids, yeah. So 7 kids, a father who moved from place to place in part to get a job or to get a place to live or to beat the rent. And so that kind of poverty in many households would have had created a poverty consciousness, a kind of, we've got nothing. But my father had been adopted by a very well-to-do Philadelphia family that was known for having had, quote, old money and old wealth, which was the real Pennsylvania or the real Philadelphia wealth, yes. And so we heard lots of stories about how we were from that family of wealth. We were not poor. And it's really interesting because I grew up.
You also weren't new money.
No, we weren't new. That would
money
have been almost as bad as being as poor as we actually were. And so we were connected to old money. My father made the reference that we were like solid mahogany and new money was like veneer. And we all knew the difference between solid mahogany and veneer. And despite our poverty, having almost nothing most of the time, my father managed to buy an antique mahogany table that was solid mahogany, which went with us wherever we moved. And so, but we had this illusion or this delusion of great wealth and prosperity, so that even in the midst of the most poverty-stricken moments where we had no electricity, we had no indoor plumbing, we had no indoor bathroom, we weren't poor. And it got me to thinking, how many of us grew up with beliefs that were inaccurate and even untrue and help sustain or grow or make us even thrive?
Another myth I want to examine is the myth of superiority of your own family line. Bob and I had to laugh when we first got to know each other and got married, because we knew growing up that Churchmans were superior. They were superior in intelligence. They were superior in being hardworking. They were even superior in being good looking. We didn't. And when Bob met my family, he didn't find all that much to be so superior. But he said, interestingly, we had the same family belief when I grew up. The Luckins were superior to all of our neighbors and everything.
But we were not considered beautiful. We weren't better looking, although better looking to each other. But
But it's so funny that we will grow up with some of these family myths, some of which are positive for our self-esteem, actually like the 2 that we shared. And there are other beliefs that we developed that nobody ever told us, but we put 2 and 2 together and make that assumption about ourselves. And these are the ones we really want to examine, because we know it is done unto us according to our belief. As Jesus said in the story in the New Testament, where the woman who was sick and wanted to be healed, but there was a big line of people around him, and she just said, she just went and touched the hem of his garment and she was healed. And she said, Lord, I don't deserve more than this, but if I can touch the hem of your garment, I knew I would be healed. And he said, woman, it is done unto you according to your belief. So we know it's done unto us according to our belief. And so we need to find out exactly what we believe. And if you don't know, a good way to find out is to look at your life, because your life is a mirror of what you believe. Mm-hmm. And some of those beliefs you might want to work on changing. For example, if you experienced a situation where you decided that people weren't able to be trusted, that could have some far-reaching consequences in your adult life, where that keeps out picturing. People do things where you say they are not to be trusted. And that can make you isolated and judgmental and unforgiving. And that can be a very painful way to live. So it's true that people can't be trusted all the time to do the right thing, but that doesn't mean that you need to just project that out onto everybody and expect them to do the wrong thing all the time.
It'd be interesting to look at your beliefs and how they are pictured in positive ways. I know for me, growing up in a family where there was a lot of dissension and struggle and battle and all of that, I fell into nature as my refuge. I moved into nature. I sought out nature, and my father used to call me Nature Boy, and which is fine. I didn't mean one thing or the other, but it's interesting that the first book, and actually the only book that I've had published that I didn't publish, but a publisher published, was a story about life from the point of view of a dog. And so I see this outpicturing in very subtle ways showing up in life. And I would be willing to bet you that if you were to track your own life, some of the earliest beliefs you had are continuing to outpicture for the good or for the bad and can be changed accordingly.
Exactly. Exactly. So other things that you might have assumed, how valuable did you feel in your family? Were you told that you were loved and valued? And if not, for example, one opposite extreme could be that your parents weren't home much because they were working all the time. And it's easy for a child to assume I must not be very valuable because nobody considers it even important to be with me, when I come home from school. And in fact, they may be working very hard to support you with food and shelter and clothes. And so, but a child can make the wrong assumption and live that out. I'm not very valuable because my parents didn't even spend any time with me.
Fortunately, my parents were always wanting to instill in us our value. My father said to me one time, he said, there's 7 of you. If one of you goes missing, nobody's going to notice.
That would make you feel
whoa,
really valuable.
Yeah, so I knew I was valuable. Yeah.
We watched a special on the life of John Belushi.
Oh yeah.
And he experienced this where his parents were just not home, and they were working and they were away all the time. And of course, he ended up dying of an overdose at the age of 33.
They weren't just not around. His mother actually left to take an acting job and then came back later. We didn't know how long she was going to be gone. So the message to him was apparently you're not worth sticking around for.
You're not very important. But we wondered because he had like a big hole in his being, his identity that nothing could fill. He had a wife who loved him very much, and he loved her very much, but no one could fill this hole of not enoughness. And I wondered what his life might have been like had he had at least one parent more home with him and supportive. But at any rate, a child can make that decision. I'm not very valuable. And we need to change that around, because there is no person in the world more valuable than you. No person alive or formerly alive. The president of the United States, who has the most power in the world, and I don't care who he is, but the president of the United States, you are just as important as he is, as she is, because each one of us is an individualization of this thing we call God, this power we call God, and each life is valuable. So we need to know that. And it doesn't matter how much money you make or have earned. It's, that's another thing we can do. We can decide how valuable we are based on how much money we've earned or based on how much education we have. And those are all false measurements.
A honeybee lives about 44 days. And in that 44 days of his life, he generates or creates about 1 drop of honey. And so how many honeybees does it take to create the amount of honey that we have that's in a hive? And so it doesn't take long, if you do the math, to figure out there are no extra bees. If there are no extra bees, there are no extra people either. And so the first thing I'd want you to ask yourself, if you don't feel valuable, is, or to say to yourself is, there are no extras. I'm not an extra. I'm an essential. And if I'm an essential person, then how will I play my role? How will I live my life as an essential, as opposed to an unessential or as an extra? I think what I run into all of the time, and I've had my own experience with this, is either acting like, feeling like, or believing myself to be an extra, and wondering why life has treated me like I was an extra. And so the big challenge for all of us is to say, I'm not an extra. And whatever role I'm playing, whether if I'm sick and in a hospital bed, and I may not even know my future, that doesn't make me an extra. That doesn't make me worthless. It means I'm part of the growing and learning of a community of people, all of whom are connected in a very profound and powerful way.
Right. So another thing we can decide, and you may have even heard this a lot growing up, I did, money doesn't grow on trees, which is another way of saying you can't just have everything you want. Money is scarce and hard to come by. Now, they may not have even said that. They may have just said money doesn't grow on trees, and you know you can't have that pair of
Yeah,
shoes.
my father said, "You think money grows on trees, don't you?" And I said, "No, I never thought of
saw
that.
it,
Never
never
thought
saw
it. He thought I thought that." Yeah.
But and we often project onto God what we thought about our own father or parents. So, do you have a rich father, as Sandra is always saying? Do you have a rich father, or do you have a father who holds back and decides what you deserve to have, and just sort of lets it out little by little? You get to decide that.
You realize the shock I experienced when I went to a Unity church and they were doing a fundraiser and they had a money tree. And
Money did grow.
and everybody
on
was
trees.
putting, I thought, damn, my father lied. I had no idea.
So in times of my life, once I was interested in manifesting a house that I really admired, and I used this Bible quote that we started out with. I would stop on my way home and look at this house and say, "It is the Father's good pleasure to give to me the kingdom," which means a spiritual life and an understanding of a spiritual life, and all things added unto it. So while our worth isn't based on what kind of house we have or how much money we have, there's also nothing saying we can't have it. It doesn't make you good or bad. It's just, what you manifest according to what you believe is possible.
So my question is, what room in your house do you need to make larger? What room in your house is too small for you to live in, and you've decided that it's okay to live in it anyway? What belief do you have that's limiting you that you could abandon, you could undo, you could change, you could simply recognize it's not accurate or not true anymore? And as you uncover those, and as you disarm those, or as you expand your living area, you expand your life. And I say for most of us, we don't have a lot of the things we want because we haven't made room for them.
We haven't talked about health yet, but we get a lot of our attitudes about health.
Yeah.
Too, from our parents, from growing up, what they believed about it. And we have to accept the ones that work for us and look at changing the ones that don't work for us.
And there's a subtle message that's delivered often too. I know when the doctor asked me, "Do you have any cancer in the family, any heart disease in the family?" What he's saying is, if you have any of that, you probably will have it too, or there's a higher risk that you'll have it.
I know. And do you know the statistics of that? The statistics of having cancer that runs in the family is like 10% of the cancers. So I don't even know why they asked the question.
Right.
It's just absurd.
But there's it's an indoctrination that you're going to be a victim of your inheritance rather than that you are the creator of the inheritance. I mean, you're inheriting the life that you're living out of your beliefs, not out of your genetic history. And we know that for everybody that gets sick from something, there's somebody else in the same family doesn't.
Yeah, and doctors know this. I'm very grateful for a gynecologist I had when I was 27 years old. And I had a cyst, and I told him that my mother had cysts too, and that she had died of cancer, cancerous tumor. And he said to me, "Well, thank goodness you're not your mother." And I thought that was the best thing he could have said to me. I loved that guy for saying that. It was just perfect. Yeah, just totally relieved any angst that I had about it. So that's what all doctors should say to us instead of "What's your history?"
And we're so suggestible without even realizing it. I mean, not recently, but a few weeks ago, I was found out that I'd been in the company of a number of people that had been COVID positive. And suddenly I didn't just have a runny nose. I might have the runny nose that goes with COVID. And then I coughed once and I thought, when was the last time you coughed? It's been a long time. Yeah, that's probably a COVID cough. And, by the end of the day, I had died 3-4 times from COVID and I didn't have it, but we're so suggestible. So why not then make some positive suggestions?
Yes. And that's so wonderful. Now he went from 9 people on the unit where he works positive with COVID to now none of them do. And he never got it. I never got it. And so, hallelujah. And it's supposed to be so contagious.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to have a COVID fiction.
really. So I would like to also ask you a question. And this is kind of based on that movie that we saw. It brought back my memories of, have you ever been away from the house you grew up in for a long time, many years, and then gone back and maybe even asked the current residents if they would mind if you walk through it? It's such an interesting experience because I was just flooded, and everybody I've talked to who's done it, just flooded with memories. When you walk in to each room, different memories come flooding back. And the first thing that happened was the house seemed so small.
Yeah.
And I remembered it being so big because I was,
You were small.
I was very little when I started remembering that house. So that's an interesting experience too, to remember things that happened and how you felt about them at the time and how they shaped you at the time. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, the song that we're going to share at the end, which we can't record, but I'll tell you now, if you want to hear it on YouTube, is Miranda Lambert's song,
The House That Made Me.
The House
That Built Me.
The House That Built Me. Yes. Yes. So we're asking, we know that this is very elementary things for our teaching, for the people who are listening, but it is a lifetime process of examining your beliefs based on what you're experiencing and see what you want to change.
But it's really the elementary things that we have given up, even giving attention to, that are often running us from behind the
Yes.
scenes. I mean, it's just so amazing to me to think that as a child growing up, I had a pet fox that I met coyotes and was on a first name basis with them. And that my first book, 50 years, 60 years later, is about a dog.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff doesn't change. And I have become known in the community for the mandalas that I make. And the mandala,
Like the one,
right, the
behind
one that's
us.
behind us, and the mandala that showed up on CBS Sunday Morning this morning after
Oh,
after the
yes.
segment passages. I've been doing them for 30, 40 years, but the mandala I grew up with, every time we moved from one place to another and we were insecure and uncomfortable and feeling unsafe in whatever the new location was, my father would then hang up a picture of Reims Cathedral, which was a picture that he'd had framed many, many years before. And that picture of Reims Cathedral was a picture of the rose window. And
Stained glass.
Stained glass rose window. I have been making rose windows now for 60 years. And interestingly enough, it's interesting to track your history and say, what in my history is replaying itself? But also, have I then put in the time and the effort to cultivate this as a gift rather than as a liability? Is there a way that I can see what's happened to me in a way that's positive? And can I use that? Or if it is positive, isn't it interesting that that positive link has continued on through my entire life?
So it's way too much to talk about now. Maybe we'll talk about it next week, because the question is, especially with new students, is always, how do I change my beliefs? That's what I believe. How can I change it? So we will work on that next week.
Well, what I would say that you can do between now and then is to ask yourself a simple question. Is it true? Is it really true?
Or is it just true in my experience?
Yeah, is it just true in my experience? What's the evidence to support this? Because so often we say, well, that's the way it is. And says who? How did that happen? And when you begin to examine it, you begin to have options that you didn't have before, because a lot of what we have come to believe is not true. It's just true for us, or it fits in the story the way we'd like it to fit for it to make sense.
Indeed. Okay. So I'm going to share our website right now.
Yeah.
No, I'm not, because I didn't bring it up. How do I get out of this? First, I have to bring it up. Well, anyway, I'm not going to bring it up, but our website, where if you'd like to donate to our ministry, where we do these talks and classes that we teach, is CSL, that stands for Center for Spiritual Living, CSL palmbeaches.org. And that's a website that has a button on the top that says ways to donate. And when you click on that, there are ways that you can support our ministry financially. So we thank you in advance for doing that.
We appreciate you doing that. And we're going to do an affirmative prayer.
All right.
Right. So what we know right here and right now is that whatever it is that you require, whatever it is you desire, it is open and available to you at many levels, and you claim it, and we claim it right here and now. We claim our wealth, we claim our wholeness, we claim our well-being, we claim the financial independence that we desire. Because when we claim it and we know it to be true, it has nothing, it cannot do anything less than become true. And so we also know this for the Center of Spiritual Living. We know that it prospers in all areas and that you, a part of the family that helps it prosper, are prospering with it. And for this, we say thank you. And we know it's true.
For it is the Father's good pleasure to give to us the kingdom and all things added unto it.
And so it
And
is.
so it is.
And now we're going to stop recording so we can play our music.